just in terms of when you first went to North Sudan and South Sudan, how were you received by the people that you were there to serve, and the wider people in general?
Well, the first impression is you're a foreigner. I mean, just the color of my skin is like, it's all sun. But that's only the initial. And people are incredibly observant, and they see beyond any facade. I think the greatest indication how I was received was when I stood against the destruction of the center. All of a sudden, I found everybody knew me. The news just spread like wildfire, and no matter which part of Sudan I go, they would, are you Father Paul? Father Paul Annis? And I said, yes. You were in Dora Shab. I kind of got linked with the event. But the beautiful event happened when a group of Egyptians came to the Sudan on a summer camp in Sudan, and the group of young people who were wanting to discover their vocation in life and what's missionary life is like. So it was arranged from Egypt to the Sudan, and I happened to be in the parish of Undurman at the time. And at night they sit down around the fire and they chat, and so each one introducing themselves. And this Denka boy who was sitting there, and they were introducing themselves. They asked me, "But who are you?" And I said, "I'm Father Paul. I was I was finishing the sentence. I was born in Egypt." The Denka boy said, "Who was Sudani? He's a Sudanese." And I thought, wow, they see me. I'm one of them, and that was the most moving statement that I've ever heard. To be seen as a Sudanese. At the beginning you're a foreigner, khawaja, they say, but when they say no, he's one of us, he's a Sudanese, it's quite moving. So there isn't a fixed welcoming, and it's not. Relationships change us and form us, and I think the time I spend in the Sudan, when you suffer with the people feels that you're part of them.
Tell us as well, in Sudan, you spoke there about when you first went there, you were kind of working in amongst refugees. For the whole period you were in North and South Sudan, what did your work entail?
Anything and everything. No. At first, I was there basically to help the catechists in their catechesis, because they knew all the different languages, and they knew Arabic and English, and I would use whatever languages I have to help them. And there was a program, a catechetical program. We used a Lumco program, which was really invented in South Africa. And it uses images, very interactive, and it takes 2 years of catechesis. So basically, I was involved in catechesis. But at the same time, when the center was destroyed, I was moved into a secondary school where they asked me to teach chemistry, of all things, of course, being an ex-chemist. So I had to pick up my O-level books again, and this time I'm a teacher, not a student, which was an incredible experience, because I kept on saying, right, one thing working in a laboratory, another thing is teaching the subject. So I had to learn how to teach from the students. And it was a unique setting, because English is not their first language, but they were preserving because everything was Arabized, but anybody from the south of Sudan, they allow them to do the English pattern of the studies. And so many found it difficult to grasp the scientific language and the style of writing, It's not the same as having a foreign language, English. So I was doing extra lessons with students, and it was hard work. It was also learning how to teach and point, in a way, picking up where the difficulty is and trying to find solutions. So it really challenged my creativity. It helped me to learn how to teach without becoming a teacher. So I was thrown in the deep end, and you couldn't get a teacher because visas were really hard to get. So you didn't have the luxury of saying, I've got a certificate of teaching. No, you just learn how to teach, type of thing. So I spent 11 years doing that. Eventually, after my master's degree, they put me as principal of the school. So um, I think what I've learned with the students, I shared it with the teachers, and some teachers kind of started using different methods of learning, because language was a great difficulty. Then in Bahr al-Ghazal, I was working, can't say a parish priest, but there is the official parish priest. But the parish was as big as Motherwell Diocese. That's one parish. And we would go on long trips, literally days, in tents. You got the mud, sometimes a bicycle, sometimes if you got a car that can survive the rain and the terrains of the forest, you take it so you can go to the furthest part of the mission. That would have taken 2 or 3 days at least to get the furthest. So we always go to the furthest point, the mission station, and then work to the closest, going back, saying masses for Christmas and Easter. So it's the same mass, but 8 times. So forget about having a calendar that you follow, because these guys would have a mass once or twice a year maximum, if the weather and nature allows, and if you can get there. So yeah, that was a parish priest with a I'm not sure what to call it. It's not like here. Here you get in the car, you got a motorway, you can long distances, you go right up. I went up and did the mission appeal in Orkney Islands, so the same, in 2 days. That was nothing, but there wasn't any in the mud and the trees that you have to cut through and put yourself in a tent. I mean, we've got welcoming parish priests. That's if they're not on holiday. But they always arrange things, which is very comfortable. Why I'm not a parish priest, I don't know. I think I've been molded into, having a parish is too restrictive. The world is just, it's just, I suppose, no boundaries. Maybe that's a bad thing about missionaries. They don't respect boundaries. No, the frontiers of the church, I think, is for me, there are no frontiers, and going beyond, always creating communities of faith is always exciting. Once they're formed, give them the responsibility, empower them, and then go beyond and help them to help themselves. I think that's Comboni's dream, is that, Africa saves Africa, and we're a catalyst, and stimulating constant catalyst, that their evangelization and our evangelization meet, and the whole culturally taking on board the values of the gospel and transmitting them in their ways, and being observant and being companions of a journey of faith is very exciting. Also, you have to invent words, and sometimes borrow words to explain the mysteries from other languages. So it's not the same as having a parish. It's a bit more.
Yeah, definitely. It's a kind of really wide ranging experience. I think when you're a missionary, and it takes in lots of things, and you, depending on what country you're in, there's different cultural aspects to it, and all sorts of things to take into consideration. From your point of view as a missionary, What would you say are the most important qualities or characteristics that you need when you're on mission?
One, patience. When you make an appointment with the elders, they might give you a time, but you have to be solar sensitive to know how they work their time. You know, I remember my first frustrating experience. We were supposed to meet at 4 o'clock, and they turned up at 7 p.m. in the evening. And so it happened twice. It happened once with a lawyer as well, who was supposed to defend me in court. And we didn't meet because he came 8 hours late. Waiting for 8 hours was a bit of a patience. But time, you don't look at your watch. That's one thing I learned. But you look at the people, and it's important that if you're waiting for them, in a way they're testing you. How much do you really want to speak to us? How would you listen to us? And that takes a lot of patience. And would you be prepared to understand us? Or are you coming with your own agenda? So that patience is a fundamental human attitude. The second thing I would say is persevering in understanding, because we can translate a word that, according to the dictionary, is correct, but it has a connotation that might be totally different from what is intended, depending how it's used. So learning how to understand others is so important. Even the way people who don't have English as their mother tongue, they use the English language in their structure of their own language. And so they might say something that you might understand as offensive, but they're not being offensive. They're trying to say something else. So being open and giving the benefit of the doubt that they mean something actually more positive than you first interpreted. And having that creative skill to ask a right question, not offending them, but really seeking understanding. They appreciate, they would feel that. And checking it with them, that deeper listening and understanding. The third, a missionary needs to think on his feet, in a sense that no matter how many plans you make, none of them will work, because the unexpected will happen. And the unexpected, when it happens, your antennas, for me, okay, God, what are you saying now? And being on the alert, not necessarily following plan A or plan B or plan C, but forging a plan as things revolve, and being generously ready to respond fully to whatever circumstances and incidences throw at you, as far as humanly possible, of course. But that would also mean to put a great trust in God and being always in tune with Him. Otherwise, several times I misunderstood the signs. I didn't read the signs of the times properly. And that in itself a learning process. So I would say thinking on my feet, but also reviewing daily experiences that God has allowed to happen. And through it, there is a lesson to learn. There's always a lesson if I want to learn. So really, I'm always a student. I'm always a disciple, learning from circumstances. But at the same time, I am free to learn. I'm not going to fix on a plan, or I won't get disappointed by failure. In fact, I learned that failure is an opportunity to see God at work. And it's more marvelous than any plan I could make. So it's that flexibility. It forms a certain flexibility in facing whatever life throws, and whatever sense God makes out of what life throws at you, because He does. He inspires. Otherwise, the mission will be impossible without him. So, I have to constantly, from morning to evening, um, my eyes to be open to see through his eyes, my mind to be molded in his mind, to pronounce the words that he would want me to pronounce, not as a kind of a copycat robot, but to what would Lord say as a constant question to myself when faced with the unexpected or the surprise or the genuine search where people are searching and they want an answer. It's not that I would give an answer, but maybe somehow listen carefully to the question. So in that sense, I think it's essential to have an intimacy with God that I think what St. Paul puts it beautifully, put on the mind of Christ. And that's a process. It's not something that you wear, something that you're molded into. And there is that always the emptying of yourself only before God to fill it up with what he wants and accept it and receive it as gift. Even the most embarrassing and painful ones, because sometimes they're the real jewels in there.
And Father Paul, just from a personal perspective, what are the positives and negatives about being a missionary?
I'm not sure whether there are negatives, but because even the negatives turn into positive. But what are the positives? I think being stretched in a way. Mission does stretch me and strip you, well, strip me anyway. Um, and in that process, something truthful about myself comes out. So I can't really neatly divide what is positive or negative, but even the negative that seems to be negative in being, in a way, crucified, if I can use that word, um, but paradoxically finding life in the crucifixion. And that is not human effort, that is God at work in a deeper level within me. To recognize that, I think, is being basically a missionary, because that's the energy that sends me beyond myself. I am not self-sufficient, but I am ready to be used in whatever way the Lord wants me to be used for the good and the benefit of the others in his incredible bigger plan than my little world. And I think that's that for me is I mean, I can't divide positives and negatives because we're just the work of his hand. What seems to be negative turns out to be positive. What seems to be positive at the beginning turns out that, wait a minute, there's a kind of a lot of humiliation happens afterwards. According to our standards, what seems to be a victory is actually a failure because it doesn't bear fruit, it can be sterile. But God uses that, and seeing it in that way, nothing is beyond the capacity of the Lord of turning things into good for all those who love him. And I think there isn't positive and negative. Everything is part of God's plan, if we can actually see it that way. And that's the trick, I think.
Father Paul, just in terms of the term mission itself, what does that mean to you?
I like the question because I've been thinking about that since I came back from Egypt. I think mission of the church, as I try to think back, work back through the church's history, and the encyclicals that were written about mission, certainly lots of things changed, and mission does change according to the social, political, cultural, historical events that happen. If I can summarize what I've come up with, and I'm no magisterium, but I would refer to what has already been said. I can see mission has a threefold evangelization. We are going through, particularly in Europe, this new evangelization, which is evangelizing, if I may say, lapsed Catholics. But really, it's not about lapsed Catholics coming back to church, but what does the faith say to our modern social setting and context? How can we bridge between what we celebrate in faith that can give joy to our life rather than isolating it to a ritual or an activity that we do and tick on Sunday? That link between the Easter mystery and our life somehow has been disconnected. We've become so visual, so virtual, so isolated, and particularly in COVID, we saw that the link that we have between what God communicates through nature and what God communicates through our neighbor, and our neighbor coming from abroad as well, should not be a cause of threat. But if really we look at our neighbor through the eyes of God, which is faith, then we can make sense of it. So this new evangelization for the new generation of young people who are growing up, what does the faith say to my life? That's a big challenge. That's new evangelization, making it the gospel. We're not modernizing the gospel, but understanding the gospel in modern ways, in our modern way. There is also the re-evangelization, because Europe under communism have lost generations, and the cultural link between the faith that was transmitted for centuries under the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which was very Catholic, all of a sudden being drained, and it became illegal to have anything religious or any faith practice. That still have an effect on the entire Europe. And maybe part of being the European countries, re-evangelization is to re-present the gospel to a generation that had a generation gap, literally in memory. So the amnesia of the faith because of the social and political situation they lived through. But also we can say that re-evangelization touches the movement of atheism, that all of a sudden children grow, they can choose their faith when they grow up. Well, out of what? Out of knowledge or out of ignorance? And who's passing the knowledge of the faith? So there is a kind of a modernism that has severed the memory of faith and culture. So re-evangelization goes through quite several complicated levels. The third type of evangelization, which very, very few people speak about, because they think that re-evangelization, new evangelization makes a missionary, which they do, but the story is not complete. We must not forget, and that's what St. John Paul II said in Redemptoris Missio, that the urgency of primary evangelization, or first evangelization, where the gospel has not been known or has not been sufficiently exposed, witnessed to the people, that should not be forgotten. Now, it is not just a geographical adgentis to the nations, or to, according to Jewish understanding, adgentis means the pagans. We don't use these terms, but there has been a paganized mentality created, that the dignity of the human being is no longer seen as a creature of God, but becomes the supreme authority to end life and manipulate it. That is frightening. And that, I would say, that's in the primary evangelization, is to re-evangelize our cultures, the cultures in the world that haven't had a history of Christianity or had a very brief history of Christianity. They are now the more numerous population of the world. And we dialogue with them. We need to, because they have crossed the borders into our nations, which many people are rejecting and are afraid of, as if they're going to steal something from us. Well, they don't, because we've stolen enough from them. That's why their situation is like that. So I know the news, and I've seen the news right in the middle of Egypt, how it was reported about the so-called Arab Spring. News has an agenda and is not necessarily saying the truth, and partial truths are lies. Paul VI said that. So in a sense, first evangelization has a threefold evangelizing activity. Addressing the cultures that find Christianity strange or foreign, entering into dialogue with other religions who seek God, and it's a sincere dialogue of knowing them, since we are now multicultural, multi-religious. So knowing how to dialogue with it, and I think that is first evangelization. And thirdly, the evangelization of the nations, going outside my culture, creates an environment that is different for evangelization. One thing to evangelize somebody according to my own culture because he is being a person from other country in my country. It's another thing to be myself a foreigner in another country and evangelize. That experience of being to go beyond my own secure knowledge and explore how can the gospel, how can Jesus Christ speak to a culture that is different than mine, where I am a foreigner, I think that cannot be denied, replaced, or substituted. And it's part of the church's livelihood, because if we have the creed that we recite today, it's because of the interchange that happened, the reflection of the early fathers of the church, of trying to transmit Christ in a different mentality. The Hellenization, as they call it, before it was the Hebraization, the Hellenization, and then the Latinization of our, why not the Africanization? Why not the Asian perspective of our faith? I think there is something that Catholics all over the world in different continents have something to contribute about the type of Catholicism, the universality of the church. It cannot be understood without being a foreigner. And we are foreigners on this earth. We will not dominate. We're not preserving our own identity on this earth. It's not the passport that gives me identity, but it is my baptism that gives me the identity that I am a child of God. And that goes beyond any country boundaries. And so anybody from Asia, Africa, Latin America is my brother and my sister, because of the baptism that I've received, the Spirit of Christ that has taken flesh. Now, the first evangelization is that's I think it's without it, there's no re-evangelization, new evangelization. I think the teacher of re-evangelization, new evangelization, is because of the experience of the church of primary and first evangelization. Because once the church is vulnerably a stranger in another land, it actually ferments the culture. And that's a miracle of the enrichment of the Holy Spirit, the plurality of the church, the universality, and the colorful of its internationality, without which we become very poor and have nothing to do. I love Latin, but we become so Latinized that we forget that there's another part of the world, another cultural expression of the same faith that we believe. And Christ becomes a bit more colorful than we would like him to be. We don't like a black and white Jesus Christ.
That's a fantastic answer, really. That's the most fulsome answer I think I've ever had to that question, and it makes a lot of sense. And it brings in the universality and the looking at evangelization from different points. I think it's really fantastic the way you described that. You've been gracious enough to tell us a couple of stories from your time in the mission. Is there anything else? Is there any more kind of standout stories that you remember that you could share with us from your time in the mission?
Yeah, how many days do you have? I think that what I shared was really turning points in my missionary experience and molded me really to be who I am today. The other experiences were really a branching of those fundamental experiences of discovering my own wounds as a place to be evangelized. So I think I was evangelized at that moment and freed me to be a more effective, supple evangelizer in the hand of God. I don't know where to start. There's so many memories are coming back so quickly. I think, well, Raja is in Bahr al-Ghazal, which is practically between the diocese of, it's part of the diocese of Wow. The two extreme borders of Raja, Bahr al-Ghazal would be the République de Centrafrique, the Republic of Central Africa, and Eritrea. So if you draw a straight line, in the middle you'll find Bahr al-Ghazal. Literally means Bahr al-Ghazal, the sea of gazelles or deers. And one of the things that I was trying to explore, the initiation, the logic, the cultural logic of the initiation of young people within the Kresh tribe. Now, Kresh was a name given by the slave traders, Arab slave traders, but the real name of the tribe is Banda tribe. And they're one of the, I would say, 54 Fertit tribes. They're not they're herders. They're not herders. They're agricultural tribes. Basically, you can see the Denka Nuer, Shilluk are herders. They graze. They're very mobile. They're not sedentary at all. Sometimes they're semi-sedentary, like the Shilluk. But the Fertit are sedentary. The land is very important for them. Agriculture is very important, and they're very much in touch with nature. So the initiation with the Fertit is different from the initiation of the herder tribes. The herder tribes initiate their children to be warriors, and they're quite harsh with the initiation. You will find facial marks on the head. The Nuer would have cuts in their head going sideways. The Denka would have the two front teeth missing. The Shilluk would have beads all around that part. That means skin that has been squeezed into little bulbs, if you like, of skin that becomes tied and with salt it becomes hard and permanent visible scars. Now, when you see these, you say, "Oh gosh, this is really human," but it's part of the initiation of being an adult. And pain is one of the things, and suffering is one of the things that a warrior has to face, has to live with. Pain and suffering does not stop living. And I realized that their initiation process is about being a resilient man who would face any eventualities when you're traveling from one place to another. It can be the desert, it can be hostile enemies, it can be hostile animals, wild animals. You have to deal with it, and you don't give up. If the minute you give up, your tribe will suffer, your family will suffer, your clan will suffer. So the initiation is quite physically, you would think, torturous, but for them, suffering is something that you have to face and live with. If you don't learn how to do it, you will not have a family. You will not be a reliable man to get married. So no marriage. So both the circumcision and the scars on the head or the broken teeth with a spear, it's all saying that your body has to survive through anything. And if you're wounded, you don't give up. So these ceremonies that are done made me reflect a lot of how we see when Jesus says, if you want to be a follower of mine, take up your cross and follow me. I started to think how the initiation that they have with their tribes fit in with our initiation sacraments, which is baptism, Holy Communion, and confirmation. And in a way, we used to say in confirmation, you're a soldier of Christ, with the helmet of faith and the shield of protection. So the symbolism was similar to the tribal symbolism of being a warrior, a spiritual warrior. So it is dialoguing with that. Now, there's loads of incidences and questions I used to ask, and not everybody would be able to give you an answer. I was very fortunate with well, I described the general Shiruk tribes, Denka and Nuer. They're the tribe. But in Bahr al-Ghazal, going back to Bahr al-Ghazal, they're totally different. They don't train them to be warriors. The first thing that a young man has to learn is to discover water. Now, they would take, a father would take his son into the forest right early in the morning before the sunrise and teach him how you would find water. The first thing is you have to identify the type of trees, because the leaves on the trees indicate which way the meadow and the wind blows and what grows on the bark. But then identifying the footprints of a deer. Bahr al-Ghazal said it's the sea of deer, or the gazelles. Because early in the morning, just before sunrise, the deer goes to the font of water, and most of the waters are not seen visibly, but they are, they call it ayn, which is like an opening, a little font, a driplet of water that comes from under the earth, only in the early mornings for some reason. And so you follow that. You have to know how to trace where the deer paths, and then you'll find water. The second thing is, from the tree, which tree would help you to collect the water using the different types of seeds. So if you imagine a coconut, so they didn't have coconuts, they had mangoes, but you have a coconut seed or any other that's big enough to be carved in order to be used as a water carrier. So how would you carry the water with thick leaves of the tree and make it into a water container so that you can survive the journey? Then how to hunt, which animals are suitable for eating, which animals are not. So living into the forest, the first journey is with the father that can last for 3 or 4 weeks. And then when the time comes, the father does the same thing. He takes you, but this time he breaks the jug that is containing the water, because at the beginning you go and fill up the water, he breaks the jug and disappears, and you have to survive and come back with alive and with a catch, according to the different certain animals you don't eat. But I must admit that my gastronomy and the menu that I had was more than I ever imagined. Like, I never had reindeer before, and there was the first time I had cooked reindeer, which was absolutely delicious. But I also had a cooked python, and it was also delicious. So I don't know what the criteria are, but what they offered me, I started to learn what kind of animals do they eat, if any. But most of the time, the dishes are made out of vegetables, different, all sorts of vegetables. Pumpkins that we use here for Halloween um, are the first fruits that come out, and they're beautiful. The taste is incredible. So these different initiation ceremonies was really a learning process, how to live life, but also how to be a person who would lead your family, would provide for your family. You don't go out shopping, you go to the forest. And so, how can I link that with the sacraments? Because the sacraments is Christ giving us his life in order for us not to just exist, but to live. And with the catechist, we used to have great time discussing those parallels and coming out with um, uh, a pedagogy, a teaching process for the young people, similar to the initiation process that they have. So to be baptized, it takes a bit, quite a long 2 years, at least for to prepare the catechumenates, but then preparing them to be warriors, spiritual warriors, or spiritual agricultural leaders. Metaphorically, it becomes, the Bible is full of symbolism. So this consists of so many incredible meetings. There's one incident that happened, and that was in November, I remember. I was sent to Raja after basically 2 military massacres of the people. And it was a very traumatic period of war. After the peace agreement was made in 1999, I was sent in 2007. So it was kind of a 6-year period. And there, the community was trying to re-establish itself, rebuild their homes that were destroyed. And some of the places that were built, like local hospitals and things, Médecins Sans Frontières, when they came, the first point of contact was the missionaries. The UNHCR, when they arrived, the first person, we were on the list of the UN to be first contact, so we can introduce them to the people. But we were there already after that aftermath. Now, many people died and they were buried. The cemetery was overgrown with bushes. So for the 2nd of November to celebrate All Souls, which was straight after All the Saints, was very, very important, because whether you are from the agricultural tribes or the warriors, the world, the spirit world, is very important. The ancestors have a say in whether you get a good harvest or a bad harvest. The ancestors will also say whether the calves will be born well or not, will they die or not. So in a way, the existence of the tribes depend on the Great Spirit. And so in their mind already, they believe that nothing is in creation that is independent of the Great Spirit. So I wanted to reconcile all the people who died with the saints, because all the saints gone to heaven, They're with the Great Spirit or God. But now Christ who died will make them rise. So I asked the people to, before November, right through October, to have the list of names of all the people in their family who died during the war. And we made list after list. And we did a kind of a song litany of a Kyrie eleison, asking God's pardon on all the souls of the departed. And to have the Mass at the cemetery. It took a week to clear the cemetery. And near the cemetery, there was a hut. And I was warned by the catechist, in the hut, there is a woman of Kujur. A woman of Kujur is it's a mixture of a medium that communicates with the spirits, and she has power to curse, to do all sorts of potions, and I've seen certain things that science cannot explain. But anyway, she was there. And as we were clearing, you can ask, why is she sitting there near the cemetery? Because she communicates with the spirits. So I totally ignored her. We cleared. We built right in the middle the altar. The people came. And you can see the people identifying where the young or old were buried. And right during the penitential rite, I blessed the water and sprinkled it. The cemetery was quite big, so I did a kind of a motion of north, south, east, west. So it's a big cross is drawn. While everybody was chanting, Lord have mercy, Christ have mercy, Lord have mercy, naming all the names of the families until we finished all the families. And there were, you can see their eyes, they danced and they wept and they remembered. And it was like a moment of asking God, heal our wounds, heal our separations, heal those who have died. And I was just sprinkling right, and the altar servers had 2 buckets of water, and I managed to do the whole lot, and my arms were just aching. But we carried on with the Eucharist. It was sunny. The dawn was coming about, I would say, 4 o'clock, so it's becoming slightly cooler, not scorching heat. And at the end of Mass, at the concluding prayer, I could see a small cloud being formed just at the horizon. And then, just as I finished the concluding prayer, I said, the Lord be with you. And the heavens went, thunder covered, was so strong that, and be with you, I could not hear it. It was an incredible sound. And I said, may Almighty God bless you. And by the end of, they said, Amen. Rain just poured down. And they were singing with joy. What I did not bless with the holy water, I think the heavens blessed everybody else. Now, apparently that had an incredible meaning to them, because the Kujur woman packed her bag and disappeared in a straight moment. What they understood is that what I have blessed them with is the God of all the ancestors, greater than the wind, the fire, everything. He came and blessed us because it's the God of our Lord Jesus Christ. And the rain was the sign of God's blessing, that he's blessed them and has forgiven. And now all the souls are at peace. And they were all night till the next day, they were dancing and celebrating in joy. And the rain just made everything so fertile. It's incredible. So water, the rain for them was God's sign. But the synchronizing timing of the words of prayer, the thunder at their response, the blessing, and the rain bucketed down exactly at that moment of Amen. I was breathless. How there's no way I could have managed to synchronize it myself. It's just happened. It's one of those things that you say God's hand is at work. You can believe it, you can say coincidence. I don't believe in coincidence. But many people after that, they people who were far away, who left the faith, who went back to traditional religion, their own kultur, they said, no, this is more powerful. So we had quite a lot of catechumens that year. Yeah, that's one of the incidences.
So, Father, you've obviously got experience as well of Missio Scotland, its work, and the work of the Pontifical Mission Societies, throughout the world. Why do you think it's important for people to support the work of Missio Scotland and its partners in the Pontifical Mission Societies?
Well, first, Missio represents and carries on to say that the church is universal, and it has a mission and responsibility in the world. Not because we invented it, it's because Christ commanded it. But also, Missio unifies all the missionary activity of the church into allowing all the faithful to have at least once a year consider the universal mission of the church. I remember in Lebanon, Peter's pence, and I used to save some money to get a certificate because I was told that if I help a child to get baptized, I'll have the certificate. And I always thought that there's somebody who's going to get baptized, and I used to collect my. I had tuck shop money, and I used to put it aside. I said, no, I'm not going to have any chocolates today. So I used to get this certificate of somebody got baptized, and I got the. I remember the name is Lillian, and I thought, yeah, I hope this Lillian becomes a good Catholic. It's an important. We need memory, and we need somebody to stimulate our memory, but also we need within the church somebody to help us to always remember that the church is missionary by its nature, and we're part of that. So I think Missio creates that universal bond between people all over the world to recognize that the openness to the other is important, and whatever participation in whatever way we can participate in the mission of the church as baptized people, you give us that opportunity. Otherwise, it will not be present in a universal sense and in a more communion format, that we are all in communion with that missionary activity of the church. Also, I think Missio being linked with other missionary congregations, we play an interactive role of enriching the experiences of the different congregations, but also the different areas of specialization within the evangelizing activity of the church. Missio has a great, I would call it a library, a reference point, communicating what the church actually does in different forms. I remember PIME that presents great publications and transmits the faith in action much more closely, practically, and also help us to open a little bit the horizon beyond the church being just a parish. I mean, the whole church is a big parish, there's more a parish of the world. I think it's a hub of a collaboration and communication, which is very fraternal, and it represents the spirit of the church as being missionary in a universal sense rather than in a particular or specific way. But it includes and embraces all the specific of all the different missionary congregations, which I think is so important, and it gives a cohesion to all the missionaries in the world, in unity with the Holy Father and with the Pontifical Missionary Institute. So, yeah, I think it's beautiful to have it and to collaborate with it and to know more about it, about its history, how it developed. I think that there's a lot there to learn from, that's pertinent even to our time.
Father, thank you very much for being so generous with your time. We're just going to end on a wee light-hearted note, as we always do with our guests, and I'm going to ask you to tell us something about yourself that people might not know.
Well, in certain in my younger days, I was inspired by the Beatles, and so I used to learn the guitar. There was still secondary school when I was in Finchley Catholic High School, but picking the guitar and getting to learn it, and eventually saving a bit of money to have proper guitar lessons, I got really fascinated by the Beatles, and some of the lyrics that they have helped me to really think, all the lonely people, where do they belong? I thought it's a beautiful phrase of mission, because all the lonely people, why are they lonely in the first place? Because they've never been accepted. And where do they really belong? I think it's in the church. So yeah, I liked the music and the lyrics, even sometimes controversial lyrics that can be understood in different ways. But I like Paul McCartney. John Lennon was very interesting, but he verged on kind of, yeah. But I still thought that he was a genius in the field of music and lyrics, but also had his own religious and political views of things, which I don't usually share, but it's okay. I still like the music.
I guess all you need is love. That's how we'll end this podcast.
Yeah.
Father, thanks very much for giving so much of your time to us today. I really, really appreciate it. It's been fascinating listening to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Missio Scotland is a Scottish branch of the Pontifical Mission Societies, the Pope's official charity for overseas mission. To learn more about the work of Missio Scotland, you can visit our website www.missioscotland.com. You can like us on Facebook, www.facebook.com/Missio Scotland. You can also follow us on Twitter, Missio_Scotland, and on Instagram, Missio Scotland. If you would like to donate to Missio Scotland, visit www.missioscotland.com/donate. You can also call us on 01236 449 774 or send donations to Missio Scotland, 4 Laird Street, Coatbridge, ML5 3LJ. Please keep us in your prayers. Thank you and God bless.